Hey, Marissa, is this the right place to be?
Can the people on Zoom hear me? We're not live yet, but we will be.
I can hear you, but I'm
Okay.
not, bandwidth, not a.
We haven't brought. We're just waiting. We'll start very shortly once I get the word.
Is everybody ready to get started? April 12th, 2022, public meeting of the Swampscott Zoning Board of Appeals, and now being after 7 p.m. We're going to get started with our agenda. We have one agenda item on for tonight, which is the Elm Place petition. We have, I see Mr. DRUCAS, who is here on behalf of the petitioner with quite a few people. I'm sure he'll let us know everyone that's here and who's going to be presenting. So I just wanted to let everyone know what my expectations are for this meeting. There's certain new material that has come into our, has come in on both the petitioner's behalf and peer review, and also for abutters who are represented by counsel. And a lot of that came in late. Prior to this week, my expectation was we would, and I told everyone at the last meeting that it looked like we were getting closer towards a potential vote on closing the public hearing and a vote. I now think, after seeing the information that has been presented, that I think it would be wise to ask the petitioner to agree in writing to continue the petition to the hearing so that we may address additional items that have been raised. If the petitioner were not inclined to agree in writing to that request, given the short amount of time that it appears we have left to reach and file a decision, I would expect we would have a vote tonight. So I would leave that to the petitioner to decide whether they will agree in writing. I don't know that we need to have that agreement at this time, but my expectation is we'll have a public hearing until 10 p.m. tonight. I will give the petitioner an opportunity to present what they would like as part of their application, which I would expect would be a summary of the various materials that have been filed, addressing responses that have come in for peer review. And I also think it's fair to the petitioner, given the late filing by abutters counsel, to have an opportunity to address those items, not tonight, but at that continued hearing, if they chose to do so, because although some of those items may have been part of open items, to specifically address those items, I would leave it to the petitioner in their discretion whether to address items tonight or not. So with that, we're going to get started. I'm going to also look to provide, after the petitioner's presentation, once again, trying to keep the comments that are made to new items or open items so that we're not just repeating and just going in circles, because we only have so much time to decide this petition, and if we fail to decide it timely, we run the risk of there being just a constructive grant. So although abutters want to be heard, and I want them to be heard, if you've made your point, and I think that a lot of the abutters who have spoken have engaged counsel, who's provided a memorandum, legal memorandum addressing certain open points and disputed points. So I would encourage abutters to really look to use our time wisely. We only have so much of it. So with that, I am going to invite, first I want to make sure that Ezra is present on Zoom. Marissa, is Ezra here on Zoom?
Yes, Ezra is here. I did see his name.
Okay, so,
Mark, can you confirm that petitioner received a copy of that?
well, I sent a copy of that to Chris DRUCAS. I called Chris DRUCAS this afternoon because I wanted to give the petitioner a heads up that it looked like we were going to need another meeting, and to be able to consider with his team a request that I make for an extension in writing to continue the hearing. And I asked if he had received it. He told me he had not, so I sent him a copy by email an hour ago, probably. So so one other thing I should just put on the record, this meeting is hybrid as permitted by the extended order that was signed by Charlie Baker to permit meetings to be conducted over Zoom. I'm going to ask again, people that are on Zoom, to not use the chat box. It's not part of our record. It can be distracting. And if you have, if you want an opportunity to be heard when it's time for public comment, the time would be when I ask for you to use the raise your hand feature. And that's how we will recognize speakers. When we have a speaker, I'm going to ask them to identify themselves with their name, full name, and their address, so that we can make an appropriate record of the proceedings. So, Ezra, I just wanted to make sure, is there anything else you think I should be addressing before I turn it over to the petitioner to get started?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. For a little while, I wasn't sure it was working, but I had to go back and forth between the YouTube and the Zoom feed, but I think I heard everything you said. I guess what I didn't hear was did the petitioner say anything about an extension, or is that hanging out there?
I was thinking I should wait until we have their presentation. I let the abutters council outline his comments that were received, probably around 4 o'clock today, and then address that issue because I don't, that's what I think I should do, at least get that on the record.
That sounds fine to me, as long as it was out there. And then you might just note it, that you also have a number of peer reviewers here. I think most of them are on the Zoom link.
Right.
Rod Emery's here, Victoria, just so people know you have those experts and your board can consult them.
Yeah, definitely want to talk to our peer review people on issues that have come up since the last meeting.
Super. Okay, that sounds like a good plan then.
Ezra, were you having trouble on the Zoom feed? I just want to make sure we're okay.
There was an issue where the audio cut out, and there's, as far as I can tell, there's still no video on the Zoom feed. But I think Marissa was putting some notes to let people know they could tune in on YouTube, and it seems to be working. I don't think the video is working, but the important thing is to be able to hear you, and that we can do that.
Okay, so you don't see any problem with us continuing the public hearing over using the YouTube?
I mean, it's certainly ideally a question for town council, but I think this is, you have a hybrid format, and it sounds like the people who are in the room are fine, and people who are at home can at least hear, and, I don't know if you even promised that they could speak from home.
I don't know that we'll have time, but we may, and hopefully we can continue to see if we can get the Zoom feature to work.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it sounds fine to proceed, but.
Well, I'm just wondering about how we recognize, well, you made it in, How did you made it in through Zoom or through?
Yeah, through the Zoom link, and then it was out for a little while, but now it's on. So
Okay.
And I assume that Marissa, are there people, there are participants in the webinar, and if they raise their hand or something, you could.
Correct. All of the Zoom features are currently working. The only thing that is not is the live stream on Zoom of this room, of the video.
Got it.
The actual video feed is not working, but we're working to get that up and running. So anybody can tune into the YouTube if they want to see what's happening in the room. But everybody can be heard currently through Zoom.
Great, okay, that sounds great, good. Yes, I think you can go.
All right, great. So I'm going to turn it over to Attorney DRUCAS.
Good evening. With me tonight, hopefully I get everybody, from Gil WINN, Adam Stein from WINN, Bruce Barrett, I see it, Eric Johannes is here, Mike Burnett, Andrew Stebbins, Deb Colbert, and Peter Freeman, as well as Angela Guy. And I think we're going to be hearing tonight from Peter, leading off. Peter is co-counsel on this matter.
Sure, thank you. Is this one working, just to make sure?
I think so.
All right, thank you.
Good
Thank
evening,
you.
Peter.
Thank you, Chris and Mr. Chairman. For the record, Peter Freeman, Freeman Law Group, representing the applicant co-counsel. And I'm going to basically give an introduction, brief summary, and also a bit of a projection as to what we would want to accomplish tonight, which is amended a bit because of the 11th hour filing of a letter from Attorney Daniel Hill.
Peter, can I just ask you to keep your voice up just a little?
Sure.
So everyone can hear. And if
Sure.
anyone is having any difficulty hearing anyone, I just invite you to move a little bit closer, if you like.
Okay. So I think that's better.
That's better.
So because of the last-minute letter, that is the reason that most likely we would agree to continue. But as the chairman said and discussed with Ezra, we'd like to really consider that at the end, go through the proceedings, see where we're at, and then we can, give you a definite answer. So thank you for that accommodation. In a nutshell, we would just like to summarize and remind everybody that we have been here for a long time with great cooperation from the town staff and the peer review, and from my client as well, both as an outgrowth of the town community meetings that we had outside the formal ZBA process for many, many months, really over a year, as well as responsiveness to some of the peer review comments. And we believe that with everything that we've submitted, which both I and Angela will summarize briefly, that we really are ready, notwithstanding the last-minute filing, that we are ready to have you close. We were going to discuss that in the vein of the final status of what you will hear about from our engineer on the couple of peer review items on utilities, but let's just hold off on that. So the main point is we really have come up with a project with all of the changes that we believe really has met all of the concerns that have been raised, and that really proves to our satisfaction, and we hope to the board, be it tonight or at the final hearing, that we have a project that is a great smart growth project. It's transit-oriented development. It provides the town, which again, as I said once before, is often lost in the shuffle. It provides the town with 120 much-needed affordable rental units and would really be an improvement to the entire area. So that is where we have been in terms of the things that have been submitted since the last hearing. We have submitted final architectural plans, likewise on the civil engineering plans. There has been a letter submitted from the fire department that states what we said they had told us. That was after we met with them on April 6th. We also submitted a memo concerning other questions or points that had been raised at the various CBA hearings. Likewise, latest and basically final review on to the utility peer review consultants from our engineer. And very importantly, remember that we have submitted, at the request of the chair and the board, a draft CBA decision that I drafted with the help of my team, naturally. So we submitted that, a while ago. It also includes the waivers. And so we do believe that we would be, or perhaps we need to say, once we decide if we're continuing, that we would have been ready to go over a decision with you, hopefully close the hearing, and if you needed more time to deliberate, certainly that's your prerogative, but to come to at least a consensus, if not a final decision. So tonight, what we will do, which is really in keeping with what the chairman just said, I will turn it over to Angela in a minute, and she will just summarize where we're at on the peer review and the just a reminder that on peer review, by the way, that on the architectural plans, the plans have been reviewed and met with really a very positive response from Cliff Bomer. So that's one item. We do think it'd be useful to hear from Ezra Glenn on some of the substance, but also procedure as to where we're at. Naturally, we would answer questions, and I would also say that, you know, your questions can be during and after the presentations. It is often useful, I find, to go over a draft decision, both so that the board members and the public and we, the applicant, and our team can really see what concerns you have, you know, where are you heading. Sometimes a straw poll is done. I'm not suggesting that you have to, but we would like to know really where you think this is headed. And, you know, you can put the caveat that you want to review what Mr. Hill sent in. We certainly need the time and want the time.
Just got this data recently, so are you prepared to address the changes with going to Burrell Street and with the what was found in their testing for actual flow on Burrell Street?
Yes, so we took a look at the flow meter data since Sunday when we got it. So meter number, just to go through numbers, meter number 2, which was further south, which would, the flow from Elm Place would go to this location before the pipe sizes increased to 12-inch. So you still have an 8-inch pipe. That max flow is 304 gallons a minute. And then you add the peak flow from Elm Place of about 66 gallons a minute. So then you're up to like 370 gallons a minute. I don't know. I don't know where the 35% came from, but I'm sure, you know, I'm sure it's valid. I don't know. I didn't have the time to kind of derive that because it. But anyway, just some more issues. I need to go back and confirm this because it looked like one of the sewer sections in Borough between Columbia and Railroad Ave might be a very low slope. I'm not sure, and that would mean it's like a it doesn't flow as quickly. And then so I guess one issue is I disagree with 35%, and I need to figure that out, like where that came from. But just looking at the numbers, like take the second meter, because you have to look at that one, because that's what Elm Place is going to flow to. We're up to 370 gallons a minute, and for an 8-inch pipe, it depends on the slope and it depends on the material, but it's generally 400, you say 400 gallons a minute to like 440 gallons a minute. I mean, different, people will say, you don't exactly know, but like design wise, you want to go by those numbers. So we're really getting close to that there. Then the other issue with the monitoring is, unfortunately, there wasn't really a significant rainfall event. During the 2-week flow monitoring, it was all very low, all less than 1 inch of any rainfall. And then, and I have to look at the plan more on this one too, but the existing sewer has an under drain, which I think we knew about, but that's just something for the town to think about, because I know like anything that does exceed will, I believe it's set up that it will flow into the under drain. I'm not sure. So we definitely don't want to add, stress the sewer, because it'll go into your, the town's spending a lot of money to try to eliminate, those connections. Because it goes right, you bypass. Vicky will, say more about that. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggie is just looking at the flow. I don't know why my I don't know I don't know how you would estimate the flow differently. I just counted the number of lots that flow to the sewer. Maybe I used a Title V number, 110 gallons per day per bedroom. So, and I assume 3 bedrooms per house. But I think that's like general, engineering practice to estimate flow that way. But I thought it was good that it's a little bit less, it's a lot less than what I thought, but you've got to look at that downstream manhole. So there are remaining questions, I'd say. Vicki, do you have anything?
Yeah, I would just say, kind of to give context for everyone, the sewer kind of surrounding the project is 8-inch. It upsizes to 12-inch at Railroad Ave.
Yes.
Yeah, at Railroad, thank you. So one of our concerns was, if you're going to add this additional flow, then the sewer should really be upsized from the point that you're adding the additional flow to when it becomes 12-inch. So when we talked about the initial connections, there were 2 proposed, but they were both to the 8-inch, and one was essentially just downstream of the other one. So by moving the sewer connection, you're still facing the same problem because you're still on that 8-inch stretch. You haven't reached the 12-inch yet. So when we're looking at this flow report just quickly yesterday, because we got it Sunday, as Eileen was saying, the meter to really look at is the meter right before it upsizes to 12-inch, because that's where the impact's going to be seen from this additional flow. And as far as the capacity calculations, we need to look at how that 30% was gotten, where that came from, because we couldn't get to it ourselves. So we don't have a comfort level with those numbers. That doesn't mean we couldn't get there, but we haven't had the time to get there yet.
So the communication you've had thus far, has it been back and forth with the written communication? But is that how it's worked with the
Yes.
petitioner, with Deborah from Hancock on these
Yes.
utility issues? Okay. Deborah, is there anything you wanted to add to in response, or you want to?
Sure. I mean, just for clarification, I did look at the 8-inch sewers and the slopes, and I understand that, that's very important. I mean, if you have a 10% slope, the flow capacity of the 8-inch is greater than if you have a 1% slope. So I looked at the existing slopes in Burrell Ave and calculated what the flow capacity of a vitrified clay pipe is, and that's how my numbers came out. So, okay. And other professional engineers in my office reviewed it. So I feel very confident that the flow is at 30 or 35% and not at capacity at the 8-inch and at the 12-inch.
So that 30% is based on the metering data at meter number 2, closest to the 12-inch?
The flow capacity was looked at the 8-inch and then also at the 12-inch.
So the
adding in the flow from the project at both times, both flow metering spots.
So it looks like from this report, though, that the second meter was set in the 8-inch before it goes up to 12. So where did they set that second meter? You're saying it was in the 12-inch?
It was just before it went into the 12-inch. In the manhole, just upstream.
So we're talking about the
EST.
the March 2022, I think it's dated 4/7, is that right? April 7th?
April 7th,
Flow monitoring report?
flow monitoring report.
And so it says meter 1, and then on page, when I looked at the line descriptions, both meters looked like they were 8-inch. At least that's what they were indicated, but maybe I'm misreading that.
That's how we interpreted it, was that they were both set in the 8-inch line, which essentially they're collecting the same data. I mean, the downstream one picks up more houses, but it's essentially the same line. So the one furthest down is the one where you're gonna see an impact first. So that's the one we looked at, which was the second meter, they called it, I guess. Swampscott meter 2, and that's at Railroad Ave, Middlesex and Borough.
And that's where the max flow was 304 gallons a minute.
Yeah. So I guess my question is that 304 30% of your calculated capacity?
So the flow metering was taken at the intersection of Railroad and Middlesex, just upstream of that manhole, which is a 12-inch line. And at that 12-inch line, I calculated what the flow full would be at that 12-inch point, and you're in gallons per minute, I'm in CFS, but it's 2.3 CFS.
Did you base it off of a 12-inch pipe? Is that what the 30%? That's based off the flow capacity in a 12-inch?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's where okay. I just, so the plans, though, they say it's all 8-inch till, like the EST report, it's all 8-inch according to the EST, right? That,
No, the line.
it was an exhibit?
Yeah, the first,
The line upstream of Railroad Ave is 12-inch.
well, US 2, your sensor location, they're both 8-inch, but then the second one that I think you're referring to has
No,
it as
is a 12-inch.
As a 12-inch.
Yeah. So the Q full at the 12-inch at Railroad Ave is 2.3 CFS.
Can you pull up the exhibit that has this drawing, the sewer inverts on it?
Let me ask Marissa, so it's the recent flow monitoring report, March 2022?
Yeah, it says sewer exhibit plan of land in Swampscott, Mass.
The Borough Street one? This one?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
it.
So now, on this,
Yep.
and my printout's very small, so it's a little difficult to read, but is the sewer between Columbia and Railroad Ave, is that 12-inch or is that 8-inch?
The sewer between Railroad Ave and Columbia is 12-inch.
So why are the inverts say 8-inch?
Maybe it was a typo, but the report states that it's 12-inch.
So if you look at the intersection of Railroad Ave and Middlesex Ave, it says invert A, 8-inch VC, in parentheses. Do you know what I mean? Look at the inverts. So the sewer between Columbia, you're saying the sewer between Columbia and Railroad Ave is 12-inch?
Correct. That 8-inch is not an 8-inch. It's a 12-inch.
So maybe revise this, I don't know, because that's kind of, that was, according to this exhibit, all the inverts are 8-inch. All the pipes are 8-inch.
Right, so that's a typo on that exhibit. So according to the report, the pipe from sewer manhole at Columbia down to Railroad Ave is 12-inch. My apologies for the error on that exhibit.
So could we get an updated plan, maybe with a stamp on it? So
Sure.
that you're representing that what the actual is, and it'll be corrected, and then we could have this analysis done and
Yeah.
see if you can agree?
So then you're saying the 30% is 30% of a 12-inch pipe?
Yes.
Okay, that makes more sense to me. It's like, I'm like, how is this happening? Okay, yeah, I didn't have a chance to go through the CFS numbers, but Okay, that makes
Okay,
more
so
sense.
that seems to be what the big issue is there, is the size of that pipe?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know how, the other issue is like that there was no significant rainfall. So as far as the 8-inch upstream of that, so so north of Columbia, so from, Doherty Circle to Columbia, we're still having 8-inch, right?
Yeah, so we're back to flow meter 1, looking at that data.
Yeah,
Right, and so at that 8-inch, the Q flow, based on the slope, is 1.5 CFS, and Q max with the project is 0.56, which is a projected capacity of 35%.
so, sorry, where are we here?
Because it's that 8-inch we're worried about, it's not the 12-inch. When it hits 12, we're good.
The other thing with this is what I was saying when I noticed the inverts. I was like, wow, is that basically flat? But maybe all the inverts are incorrect on this. It was 0.1 difference between two inverts on this. Where the heck was it? All right, my copy is just so hard to see.
Well, while you're looking for that, I'm just gonna raise a separate question. I was gonna ask Peter about, have you done any due diligence on the ability to connect across Doherty Circle, which I see that there's some suggestion, and I think we've run into this about whether or not it's a public way and what there is for easements and title, to see if you have the ability to connect there.
May I answer
Oh,
that?
yeah, absolutely.
So, the sewer and utilities that are in Burrell Street belong to the city.
Yeah,
And so, according to Gino, there's no easement that's required. It used to be a right-of-way, and then it became a private road, but the utilities still belong to the city.
well,
So-
that's Burrow Street, you're saying. I'm
On-
wondering about.
On Doherty and Burrow, yes,
So on Doherty.
yes.
But that's, I have all the respect in the world for Gino, but in terms of, I think you ought to make sure you have the title work done, and to make sure you have the ability to connect and can present, some evidence that says, okay, here's a recorded utility easement, or there's an easement by prescription, or whatever you're relying on of record, or if it's an opinion of somebody who's gonna stand behind it, I think you should have that as part of your petition. Just my thought on it. Because if there isn't an ability to connect, and, I don't know how the Swampscott Housing Authority, if they own that land in fee, I don't know who owns that Doherty Circle. But my suggestion is, we should figure it out. So just a comment on that. So, on the utilities, so, Eileen, is there anything else that you think we should be, in terms of the open items? What should be addressed before our next hearing?
Oh, for the utilities, well, I think as far as the water, I saw that, the fire department is requiring the hydrant be connected to an 8-inch. So that was good, because I didn't know what else to say with that, because it was like, fire hydrants are supposed to be connected to an 8-inch. So I read that, and it seemed like that's gonna be resolved. And, I just thought I had seen last night a real flat sewer, but I'm looking at it now, and I don't know. I think I just have to, we just have to look at that 8-inch, because that, like Vicky said, that's the concern.
Right, so you'll have an opportunity to, and ultimately, I think it's the petitioner's burden to satisfy you that the project has good engineering practices and is appropriate for health and safety. So those are all things that I think need to be vetted out and make sure that you're comfortable with with that, and if not, to let us know that you're not. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would also, I mean, I'd like to see, so everywhere where there's an open item, I don't think it necessarily needs to be closed, but I'd like to know that it's something that conditionally could be met, or could ultimately, you know, subject to a condition, you know, could be satisfied. Or conversely, if there are any open items which are so open that they couldn't be ultimately satisfied. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we had revised that table because we understood the confusion afterwards about what we meant by open. So we had revised it to show the ones that we thought could be conditioned. And so therefore, you know, they're not a sticking point in the present, but that may not have made it out to everyone. I think we just sent it out yesterday. I think Ezra had asked us to revise the language. We did.
The other thing that I think would be helpful is, just because we're getting close to the time where we actually are going to need to vote, it would be helpful, I think, for me, and I'll just speak on my own, you know, to the extent there is a disconnect on any of these items, I mean, I looked at that and I spent some time on it, and a narrative would help, at least would help me, I think, and it might kind of help some of the fractures in the communication line, just like we just did here. I don't know if that's something that you guys are used to doing, or if you could do.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Okay. All right, great, thank you.
Yep.
And also, if there is a proposed condition, spelling out for us specifically what the proposed condition is, if it needs to reference a standard that's objective, codified somewhere, that, so we know where to, you know, what to put into any type of decision as to what the proposed condition and standard should be, and then that the petitioner's engineer and the peer review engineer agree that's the appropriate reference for any condition on the item.
I just have one comment in regards to the comments from the peer reviewer. There was a lot of comments regarding a preliminary plan, asking for construction documents and details that aren't normally required, that we have to abide by in order to get a building permit. So I think that if the reviewer could possibly look at those in more detail, if they're just standard construction documents that we would be required in order to obtain a building permit, that they possibly remove those comments.
So you're saying that in terms of to revise the comments, because you're suggesting that it's premature to be looking for building plans at this part of the development process for this type of petition.
Right.
Okay.
That's my
Mark, if I-
request.
Yeah, let me ask, I've got an expert here on this, Ezra, to help us
I
out.
was just gonna say, I mean, I can certainly see where they're coming from there. It would seem like a lot of that could be addressed with a single condition that would say prior to the issuance of a building permit, you know, such much be submitted, and you get the technical language from the peer reviewer, you put it in once as a condition, and it resolves a bunch of those issues in their review, right? Because they can say if the condition is now in there. It doesn't have to be before this review is complete, but it has to be before the building permits issue, and that's fairly common to put stuff. You know, there's a number of things we can address in this process, and there'll be a new plan, and we don't even need a condition. There's a number of things that are coming in at the last minute, and we want a clear condition, exactly like what the chair is asking for. You know, just the language we need to add in, and assume, you know, maybe the next review is the last review we're going to get on this. We just need, what's that language so that the decision is basically a collation project. We take those conditions and we slap them on, and assuming that the board's in favor and trusts the peer reviewer, that's the condition. And then the third is these kind of blanket conditions that maybe, would apply more, just sort of, they're kind of belt and suspenders kind of things, that you would want that language in there, even if you trust that there's other authorities that are reviewing that. Does that make sense?
It does, and perhaps it's taking some of those, if we could ask Eileen and Victoria to take a look at the proposed decision that with conditions that Peter filed, because if there are proposed conditions that reference a specific edition of the state building code, for example, if you had any comments on that, if it's a sufficient condition, or if some other technical standard should be required or included in a condition, we wouldn't know where to look. We'd have to rely on the petitioner and our peer review. So I'd ask you to take a look at that so that you could let us know.
Sure.
All that said, I think it's amazing how much the peer reviewers pivoted on this, and I do think that we're at, as the discussion just showed, I think we're at this sort of 11th hour where we don't want to run into the problem of mistakes being made simply because things are rushed. We do want to make sure the peer reviewers have that last chance to look, run all the numbers again, get comfortable, and that the language in the draft decision matches the conditions that they're recommending. So the board, has confidence that everything's been, that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. But that said, I do think it sounds like we've fleshed out what all the issues are that need to be resolved, and we are moving towards resolution of nearly all of them. The applicants indicated all of these can be resolved either through a modification of the plan or a condition. The peer reviewer seems, as I'm reading it, seems that they believe that doesn't sound, that passes the laugh test, but they still want to run the numbers. Is that reasonable to say?
Yes.
Okay. So that would, to me, would suggest, and it's certainly the board's decision here, but it would seem to me that we're not quite ready to close the hearing, because once we close it, we can't get more information from the peer reviewers. And I really want to be sure that the board has that information. But I think we are maybe at the point of saying there are not new issues to resolve. There were simply these issues to pin down.
With respect to water and stuff.
Right, just so what we
Exactly.
about
Yes.
with those
Yes.
utilities.
Yeah, I would want to make sure that the raising of that system with the runoff water is not something that we're conditioning. That's something that that our peer review is actually seeing and going over. I wouldn't want to see that as a condition.
Well, I agree. So this is, and it sounds like it's still open in terms of our peer review. Engineers are saying that it's a significant change. There's going to be a different design. They've got to look at it. I got to make sure need to make sure they're satisfied with the data, that the calculation as to where they agree with the conclusion as to where the groundwater height is. And
I'd want to know specifically if that was done after the rail trail tunnel, or I'm not sure what we're calling it, but to the
connection.
Yeah, the connection. Does that water table impact that analysis?
I think we've heard that tunnel is, right, we're having, well, I don't know that it's a discussion.
I think we might get some
Yeah.
more information about the tunnel tonight. So I'm sure that's something we're going to talk, or the switchback, I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But I think that's probably it for those utilities, right? Is there anything else, Eileen or Victoria, that you think we should be talking about on the list with?
It was just, I found what I was curious about last night, and this for the sewer exhibit. If you look at the invert at Columbia Street, it says invert D 14.5. Yeah, right there. And then at Middlesex Ave, the invert A is 14.4. So maybe it's just 0.1. I thought it was, I don't know what the scale is on this, but it looked like maybe it's like 200 feet between it. But I was kind of wondering what, if that was correct, if it was only 0.1 change between those two manholes, and then what was the manhole at the rim, like right in between them with the standing water? I was just kind of curious about, and it says sump equals 14.7, but I can write those, you know, as questions or comments or what have you, but see where the MBTA commuter rail is?
Yeah.
But it's just, it seems like, you know, if the pipe size isn't correct, then maybe the inverts aren't listed correct either, I don't know. See how in the middle there's like a manhole with M?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a metering, maybe it's a metering manhole, or I don't know what it is.
Deborah, do you have any info on that?
I do. So the slope, it is very flat there. The slope is 0.004 for that 12-inch line because it has to get under the railroad tracks.
Okay,
And so the capacity of a 12-inch is very low. It's only 2.3 CFS compared to a normal 12-inch pipe that would be at 1% or 2%. However, yeah, so the slope is 0.004, and I did do the analysis and the calculations to figure out what the flow is in the pipe, and still it came out to be 36% projected capacity. In regards to the manhole, that's a drain manhole. That's not part of the sewer. So they were the survey team was only able to open up the rim. So that doesn't have anything to do with the sewer line.
they're not connected there then?
No, they are not. But I'm happy to meet with you and discuss further calculations.
I see there's a hand up there. We're not going to take any questions about it just yet. We're still letting the petitioner address. I'll give people an opportunity. So if you just reserve your question, please.
Yeah, so I think, just in general, our look at the sewer really has to be at that 8-inch before it goes to 12. So that's what Eileen and I are gonna look closely at, because that's where the problem will be, if there's a problem. It's not gonna be down at the 12-inch. So we'll look at that more closely with this new information.
Okay, great.
And if it's possible, I guess I would say, look at it more closely, and if you agree that it's fine, say it's fine. If there's some condition, no matter how dramatic, that's necessary to resolve the issue, just write that out and give it to the board, because if the board has to close the hearing, I want them to be able to have whatever they need to dictate to make this work. You know, even if it's rip up the entire town and redo the sewers, or whatever it is, you know, obviously the minimal necessary to solve the problem. But it's, you know, I think we're at the point where we can continue to ask the applicant what they propose to fix it, but at some point, we need to just legislate what they need to do to fix it. And hopefully it won't come to that. Hopefully we're all in agreement that it's okay.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Ezra. So I'm just gonna ask one last time if there's anything other than, now that we've talked about the open issues we have with the sewer, is there anything on the water or additional on the storm water, which I think we've already talked about, that you think you should be telling the board about or the petitioner about, or if we should move on to the next area of peer review?
If I could just comment that there was in one of the notes, a reference to a memo from the fire department about a private hydrant, and I just didn't see the memo attached. So would like to see that.
Okay, so we'll ask, I did see a one-page letter that was filed from the fire department. I've got it here.
Or maybe it
But
just
it
wasn't
didn't.
on the email.
It was dated 4/4/2022, and it said the fire department will require the existing hydrant on Pittman Road side replaced with a new hydrant supplied by a minimum 8-inch line, tapped from the nearby 12-inch water line running along Essex Street. And said also require the addition of a fire hydrant on the Elm Place side and no objection to it being privately owned. So is that on the revised plan? Does it show it on there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So with that, anything else, Victoria or Eileen? We move on? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate you
Yeah,
being
thank you.
here and your comments and your work. Peter, is the next area you think we should approach?
No, we don't have anything else further to present. As we said, nothing new in architectural, and those points that we just discussed, which was a good discussion, helpful, appreciated. That's really it in terms of any presentation from us tonight.
Is there anything further on the rail trail? I thought there was something on rail trail that I was expecting.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So there's a letter that was dated today that was sent from the Assistant General Manager at the MBTA and copying the Executive Director of the MBTA, so from the actual MTA, not a consultant, saying just very clearly that the underpass option and the overpass option are both viable options. Specifically, was making that point, and that any conversations to the contrary are not up to date and are not from the MBTA. And in addition to that, they mention in this letter that the board has that the rail that passes behind Elm Place is part of Phase 1's electrification plan for the MBTA, which therefore requires certain incremental work to be done for any overpass, because the electrification requires certain clearances, and I forget what they called it. Let's see here. Well, it says it in here, but certain hard division and separation between the electrification work and any safe pedestrian crossing. Mm-hmm. So essentially, what this letter, which you guys can parse, basically says is that the overpass is probably less likely than an underpass, given that. And that would an overpass be even considered, the electrification requirements would require such a dramatic rising and dropping
Because of the height.
because of the height, that something like 12 switchbacks on a bike would be required, which is nothing I think anyone at the town would ever get behind when they understand that. That's not a crossing, I believe, that any biker would wish to go with 12 streets. So we want to make sure that that's clear to the board, that the underpass and the overpass are both options, but that from the MBTA, but that we believe, based on this letter and then just the sight lines of what the heights would be, that switchbacks would make it almost unusable if it were an overpass as opposed to an underpass. So we wanted to make sure the board had seen that.
So put that in context, because of this particular situation, we have a situation with the top of the tracks is 8 feet above the topography on our side of the tracks. So the 22.5-foot clear height you would need from the top of the rail, plus that 8 feet, amounts to about 360 feet of ramp, not including the landings you would need to comply with ADA regulations. So literally the length takes you to Pittman, aside from the fact that Pittman goes up a little bit. So it is literally 12 back, forth, on both sides. And the advantage of the 8-foot, though, in an underpass scenario, we're only down 6 feet below our grade, so it's an actually eased underpass that relatively simply we can drop foundations to accommodate that trail. And a trail, again, that, as Gil was suggesting, is much more readily usable because it's a very eased slope because of the natural topography that exists between the tracks and the topography on our side. The other side is not as relevant because you have the length to deal with that, but on our side, it is a more realistically usable and inviting bike trail connection.
Okay, well, thank you.
Does that relate at all to what we were just talking about with the water table being really high there? If we're going 6 feet below, and we've said the water table's at 4.
The water table is at 4, just to clarify that, the geotechnical borings we've taken on that side of the property, the tracks, we have 2 feet of play from the bottom of the lowest point at elevation 25 of that underpass. We've got another couple of feet before you hit groundwater.
Okay. I mean, because we have, that underpass that you drive in is always flooded.
On Burrow.
On Burrow, yeah, that goes under the track, so.
But the elevation, I think, is higher here where this underpass would be
Well,
as opposed to Burrow. Is that what you're
The
saying?
difference there is the capture. It's all hardscape. That's rainwater you're catching on the surface. That's different from the groundwater situation. So what would happen, the best installation for something like that, and as the T has done at other areas, you lift the track, you drop in a precast concrete culvert. So it's a one piece. You drop in place, there's no, you don't have to form and wait. It's a very quick operation from the T's perspective. And if you set that on drainable materials, crushed stone, the groundwater has no impact on kind of the structural stability of it. It's designed and compacted in a way that, again, happens very quickly and doesn't get affected by groundwater. That's groundwater as opposed to surface water.
May I make one more comment?
Absolutely. This was all new stuff to us, and it's interesting, I think important on some of our analysis.
Yeah, and Deb Colbert again, I haven't done any analysis of the underpass at the railroad. However, a lot of times when you go under railroads or under other roads, it all has to do with how are you mitigating that runoff. It doesn't have a play in regards to the groundwater. It has a play that has to do with your system, your stormwater system here in Swampscott. And so there's flooding happening there because of possible, the catch basins aren't large enough, the drains aren't large enough. So there's 2 different things that we're talking about. We're talking about runoff that you're capturing and then groundwater, which is 2 different items.
Okay, great, thank you. And the problem on Burrow Street is the runoff, not groundwater, right? Under the train, or under the underpass on Burrow Street. That's all stormwater that it's not being discharged, it's just collecting there in heavy rain events.
Right, so is there no catch basins there that should be capturing that?
Well, I just know it floods.
Well, I know.
I can't drive through it.
It's, right.
It's a problem. That's all I know.
Right, so downstream where it's capturing, the system isn't large enough to handle that quick runoff, so.
It's a lot of road.
It's a lot of road.
Stetson as well.
Oh, Stetson gets it too? I just knew on Burrow, it's all the time. So, okay, so let me just make sure on my notes what I thought we should be, so I had
This
some.
letter in the letter from the MBTA, was that on the OneDrive? I missed that.
This is brand new, it's dated
Okay, so I
today.
haven't had, so again, I haven't had a chance to read it.
Another reason that this, I
Like,
think
has our
has to do
town had a chance to
open
read it?
space and with planning, and I think this is another reason why the petitioner should agree in writing to.
Understood. I don't think there's much question. And as you could just tell, I wasn't aware that that letter had come in. I was still traveling on the road, so
Okay.
I understand.
And
All right.
we understand it's not easy to get a letter from the MBTA.
So, all right, so it sounds like there's going to be a written extension. A few things that I wanted to ask about, just so I can be clear about it, because there's so much information that was coming back and forth. Rodney from World Tech, he talked about 2 suggestions. A new sidewalk along the residential side of the leg of Elm Place rather than crosswalk. And he talked about portion of Elm Place being one way. And I'm just trying to understand what the change, if any, in the plan is relative to those suggestions, if you could explain that.
Yeah. We have not seen these comments, so this is new.
Oh, so it was in the March 21st, you know, maybe these were addressed earlier, March 21st, 2022, additional comments. memorandum that's on the OneDrive.
Sure, so, sorry, this is March 21st memo from World Tech.
The March 21st World Tech memo,
Okay.
it's on the OneDrive. I don't know
Yep.
how long ago it was put up there, but he made 2 comments.
Yep. So we do have, and I can pull up we would have a response to that. We do have Jeff Dirk from Vanas, I believe he's with us, he's on Zoom. So Jeff, I don't know if you want to take this. Let me,
Is Jeff?
hey Jeff, yep.
I think you're on.
I think we can't hear you, Jeff.
No, I haven't said anything yet. So good evening. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Jeffrey Dirk with Vanessa and Associates. I have to say, this is the first I've seen of these comments, so I think similar to the other individuals who had speaking tonight, I would like to have a chance to digest this first before I.
That's fine. A lot of stuff coming in, this is coming in from the town, it's coming in late. So it's, there's lots of stuff that's just the nature of it. So just something to consider before, hopefully before the next meeting, you could consider those 2 comments from Rodney and see if you are proposing to make any change to the plan as a result.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. My other notes. I had the fire
Actually,
hydrant.
can I jump in with a quick question there?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but were those things that Rodney was putting in because he thought the board was asking for that sidewalk, or because he thought that the applicant was proposing the sidewalk? Do we know that?
So he specifically says, so he looked at the additional parking on for Elm Place, the 21 parking spots that were put in. And so he wanted, it was an updated plan, so he reviewed that, and he had 2, he says there are several design alternatives that we recommend which may improve safety.
Got it.
So he didn't say it should be done, he said these are suggestions that he recommended, so our peer reviewer recommending to improve safety. So I just wanted to make sure that the petitioner had an opportunity to address it. I wasn't sure if it was addressed or not. So I'm sure we'll get something further on that.
Sounds good.
And Jeff will get a chance to speak with Rodney about what is proposed.
Mark, can
Got
I
it.
ask a question?
Yeah, go
So
right
we
ahead,
should-
Paula.
Sorry. With the parking, we talked last time about getting the building inspector to look at the tumble tots, whatever it's called, the Tumble Academy, and the use of that parking spots, and whether it was in the.
So what the
kind of
petitioner,
photographs
what the
and-
petitioner has given us since the last meeting about the
Did I miss
the
one?
parking, there was a letter or an email from the occupant saying she was satisfied with the parking for her use, the 50 spaces and with the plan. And there, I'm not aware of there being anything further that the petitioner is putting forth to suggest that the park, other than what Jeff from Vanas has put forth and his opinions about the ratio and what Rodney has told us about parking. So I'm not aware, I think I've covered, that's what it is, basically.
Well, the only thing we did, we had a resident count the cars and came up with 70
In
parked
photos,
cars,
part of our
photos,
record.
as part of the record, but we never got an official accounting from the petitioner of the, yes, the owner Burke says 50 spaces is fine, but we've never gotten an official accounting.
That's a concern that with me too, that I've looked at, I brought that up the last hearing, that I looked at the website for Burke's and all the uses they have going on there. They've got spin, they've got the tumbling, they've got private training, they've got a gym. There's a lot of stuff going on there. And I agree, that's, it's one thing to have 50 spots dedicated and that the business owner is satisfied, but I agree, I'd love to hear more from someone who's done some calculations, looked at it, and see what the actual use is during the week, on weekends, and is the 50 spaces enough? You know, it's one thing to get the say-so of your tenant who's there under a lease. And
It doesn't really have, it's in her best interest to be happy with it, you know, as opposed to-
arguably, so
Yeah.
if that's all they have, that's all they have. That's what they're putting forth and saying, vote on it with that information. But if there's something more that you want to present, the abutters have presented evidence that suggests that there's a lot more than 50 cars. So we can leave you with, you know, that's my thought on it.
Yeah.
The other thing I was wondering about from the April 5th letter, that in the response, you mentioned about Elm Place, that a raised crosswalk near the corner of 34 Elm Place, and that you would assist the DPW surveying the right-of-way out, because it's not part of your land, and that you would assist in the surveying, and then can determine whether a raised crosswalk would be okay and wouldn't cause draining issues. So if a raised crosswalk was something that would work and wouldn't affect drainage, is that something that you're proposing the petitioner would make as part of its project, that would be a condition that the petitioner pay for that raised crosswalk? Or are you suggesting that it's just, you'll assist and see that, okay, well, it's okay, and the town can put it in because it's on their property? That's one thing I was trying to understand.
Yeah, I can take this one. So yeah, we've talked to Gino about post approvals and conditions, helping with surveying a lot of Elm Place and trying to help provide the town with information should the town want to make various improvements. So we'd already, prior to this issue of a crosswalk or a raised crosswalk or something else coming up, we'd already talked to Gino about that. So we're more happy to, you know, provide more information. I don't know that we were advocating for it to be a condition that we put that in. We feel like it's the town's choice to, after they review all the information, the data, the drainage, to see if they would want to do anything there.
But it would be at the town's expense to do it? Or is the petition, are you saying as a petitioner that if the town wanted an elevated crosswalk, as part of all the infrastructure work that you're doing here, you would construct the raised crosswalk?
We're not going to have the information until.
No, I understand that, but if Gino came back after doing all this survey work and drainage, and our engineer looks at it and says, yeah, it works, is that something that we could make a condition that says that as part of all your site work, at the request of the town, that you would put in that raised crosswalk? Or is it something that it's the town's responsibility to do so? I'm just trying to be clear or understand, you know, what you're proposing from it.
Understandable question, and I'm not trying to kick the can down the road, but let's put it in our list of, we'll take it under advisement, since we have a lot of responses we're going to have to give you. And, you know, what it in some ways comes down to is ultimately it depends how many asks, if you will, are there, because it may not sound like, you know, a lot individually, but if it turns out there are many and the cumulatively have a serious economic impact, that would be the only concern. You know, we certainly, if it makes sense to do and cooperate with the town, as Angela said, sure. So again, as I say, I don't mean to kick the can down the road or in any way to be coy about it, but we'll need to, you know, look at the whole picture, and, you know, maybe after we look at it, we say this one, maybe, you know, maybe the answer is yes. I'm not saying it is, but, you know, it's a fair question, and, you know, just give us time to talk about it for next time.
Sure. But your petition, I see that as, you know, a safety issue, something that we have jurisdiction over. I know that, you know, that may not be a big ask, and I'm not asking for it, I'm just suggesting as part of your petition, it might be
Sure.
something to consider, because I just wasn't clear from the response. So is there any questions of the petitioner from anybody else on the board? Because I was going to next ask if Attorney Hill was here, if he wanted to address the recent letter that he sent, and.
I had one question.
Yeah.
On the fire department, I saw the comment, it was mostly about the hydrant and the water issues. I just didn't, I seem to remember at the last hearing, we talked about access and turning radiuses, and I didn't know if there was any further comment on that. I tried to find it on the drive this week, and I couldn't see anything on that. Has the fire department commented in writing? Do we have that?
Yes, so they've submitted 2 or 3 memos, so we can make sure it's in one of those memos. But
Okay.
they've reviewed there's an exhibit in our civil plans that show all the turning radiuses, and they have signed off on that.
Okay.
In time-wise on that, because I remember it was pretty early on in the process, and there's been some redesign, so
Yep.
that might be something to
They've
take a look at if the study still works with any redesign.
Yeah, the big update was back in our January meeting with you all, and they reviewed
And
those.
there's been no substantive change on the design of the parking area or the roadway that would impact their conclusion.
No, so to be clear, they have reviewed the latest and greatest.
Okay, great,
And they've signed off on that somewhere?
Yep.
okay. Anyone else have any questions? So
Can I just make
oh,
one?
yeah.
Sorry,
sure. I
just,
didn't mean to cut you off.
no, this is just a minor thing, going back to that World Tech letter, just for the record, because I misspoke, I was confusing dates and thought you meant February, but we have not ever seen that March 21st letter, so this is the
Okay,
first
our
time that we've heard of
apologies
it.
for that. Trying to make sure everything is being distributed, but ultimately, it's my responsibility to make sure everything gets put on the OneDrive, and I've been trying to make sure if I see something isn't CC to Mr. DRUCAS, I send it to him. So I'm doing my best on that, but I apologize. So is anything else that you wanted to add, Angela, or I'm gonna give you an opportunity to reply, but I'm not gonna require you to, because the letter from Attorney Hill came in at the 11th hour today, so you are more than welcome to reserve your comments on it till the next hearing or before the next hearing in writing. Okay, so is Attorney Hill here? Hello.
Good evening. Do you want me to speak here?
That's fine. It's been so long since I've been in the room.
Maybe I'll move the microphone so we're not so close.
Right, yeah, whatever you feel comfortable with, or you're,
Oh, sorry.
I think that's on.
Is this
You're
on?
welcome to take it off.
Testing, 1,
if
2.
It's more comfortable with.
We're good? Okay. All right, for the record, my name is Dan Hill. I'm a land use attorney, and I represent some of the neighbors and citizens of Swampscott to the project. And I'm the 11th hour guy, and I apologize for the delay in getting this to you. I've spent the last couple of days reviewing the project and reviewing the new information that came in this weekend from the applicant. Some real substantive changes, as we've been talking about tonight, on the sewer system, the drainage system, and the civil plans were changed as well. So it took some time on my part to get up to speed and to pump this letter out, and certainly didn't expect everybody to be able to respond to it tonight. But I'm happy to hear that the hearing will be continued. I'm happy to hear that the peer reviewers will be looking at all of these issues in depth before the hearing is closed. And I did want to just start my comments with actually my last section, Section E of my letter, since that really, I think, is the main message for tonight for us, is that the board should be very careful about the conditions that it puts in the permit. I've had this debate with Ezra on a number of projects around the state, and with all due respect, it's not correct that you can put conditions in your permit that require the developer to obtain further approvals from town boards or officials. It's simply not allowed. It's not even allowed under 40A, let alone 40B. And under 40B, we have to be really careful about the conditions, because if we get the conditions wrong, the State Housing Appeals Committee can turn those around. They can basically take the conditions out of the permit. And there's a lot of recent precedent on this, and I've cited a few cases in the letter. In March of last year, as my friend Peter Freeman knows, many decisions were issued by the Housing Appeals Committee on one day in March, and almost all of them criticized the zoning board for putting these types of conditions on the permit, and they simply struck them. So you can't put a condition, for example, on the permit that says, the developer can come back to us later after the permit's been issued for review of the stormwater system. That was suggested by the engineer for the applicant in the matrix. So again, I think you're on the right track. You're having peer review really vet these issues thoroughly during this open hearing process, which is great. And then hopefully we get to the end of the hearing and the conditions are truly the type that yes or no, like you explained, Mr. Chair, is there an objective standard that somebody reviewing the submittal can say, yes, this complies, or no, it doesn't? Because anything that's discretionary is going to get stricken by the HAC. So that's my last point, but it's my first point right now. And then just going to some of the substantive issues, and I'll try not to repeat what others have said. With respect to the wastewater system, the sewer system, we were confused as well by the design and the flow monitoring report. And I guess, the question I have for the applicant is, was there a document that I missed that contained all the calculations and analysis? Because all I saw on the OneDrive was the flow monitoring report, which is basically a lot of raw data and photographs, and then that exhibit, which had basically the conclusions as to what the capacity was. But I think what Eileen and Vicky need, and what we all need, is to see the actual backup for the capacity analysis. That would, I think, put all of us in the comfort level that there's adequate capacity in those 8-inch lines.
Okay, so that's a fair point, and I think that our peer review is looking to really analyze those issues on with that connection, whether it's 8-inch, whether it's 12-inch pipe, and the underlying data, the report. So that's definitely a fair point.
And then the other question that sort of popped up tonight as I'm listening to the testimony about all the flooding that's occurring under the railroad bridge on Burl Street is, has anyone looked at whether there's any reports of sanitary sewer overflows in Swampscott? And it's a thing that happens around the state. They're called SSOs, the lingo, and whenever there's an SSO in a community, it's supposed to get reported to DEP, and there's a database of all SSOs for every municipal sewer system. I think it's worth looking at, just making sure that we don't have any kind of SSO problem in this neighborhood, because if there is, this project will definitely exacerbate it by increasing the flows into the existing system. So it's just one of those check-the-box things that we'd recommend that be researched and vetted. I haven't looked at it. I mean, we can all call.
Who maintains that? Is it the DPW?
DPW would have the list, as well as DEP. Kevin Brander at DEP is in charge of the wastewater division, and he has a statewide database. So.
I mean, isn't that what we're doing in our town?
We have this whole mitigation
problem.
with infiltration and illegal tie-ins.
Yeah, that's different. That's I&I, and that.
Okay.
So that is a problem, and that's what reduces capacity when you have infiltration. But this is a situation where pipes are in such bad condition and the capacity is too strong that when it rains, a lot of the runoff is getting into the sewer system, and it's causing the sewer system to basically surcharge. And so whenever there's a manhole, that manhole could lift up and raw sewage come out of that manhole. It happens. It happened in a project in Winchester that I worked on. So it's just something to look into to make sure we don't have that issue here.
So is that something that perhaps maybe your clients as abutters who are interested here might want to look into?
Yeah, I will make a call, but I would encourage the applicant to report back, and perhaps Vicky and Eileen have already looked at it, so I'm just raising it.
Okay, that's a very good comment.
And then respect to the title issue, the chairman already referenced that. That's something I think is worth investigating. To what extent does this developer have the right to discharge this sewage flow through basically the housing authority's property? I understand that sewer line may have been there historically, but it's not clear to me that that's an automatic right to increase the sewage flow through that system on Doherty Circle. With respect to stormwater, I did look at the new plans briefly today, and in my letter, I provided some analysis of what I thought was an issue with the infiltration system. That, I think, got answered tonight. Basically, the current system, as shown on the plan, would be submerged in groundwater. But I think what I heard tonight from the engineer was that that's going to change, that the system's going to get elevated. And that, frankly, is going to, I think, require a lot of consideration, because once you start elevating the whole parking lot, now we're talking about potentially other issues that could crop up. So I'm glad that Eileen and Vicky are on top of that, because that could be pretty substantial. And I think this kind of goes to another point that I kind of disagree with the suggestion that we're at the 11th hour and things can just kind of get rolled into conditions. To me, the changes that were made in the last week are really substantial. I mean, you have basically a new stormwater system, new sewer connection, yeah, these are really major foundational aspects of a project. And I guess, you know, I also share the concern that this member had about the tunnel. If we do raise the parking lot and the stormwater system, does that somehow affect the viability of burrowing the tunnel under the railroad tracks? And I think that should be answered by the applicant too. With respect to the open space issue, I know this was raised by both the planning board and by Cliff Boehmer, the architectural peer reviewer. It's really striking that there is zero open space. I mean, I work on a lot of these 40B projects around the state, and I don't know if I've ever seen a project with such a deficiency as this one, in a town. I mean, I've seen this in Brookline and more urban areas, but not in a suburb. And I will say that the Housing Appeals Committee, although I typically disagree with their interpretations and decisions, at least has recognized that the need for open space is a legitimate local concern. In fact, the statute, Section 20, talks about balancing the need for affordable housing with the need to promote better building design and relationship of the project to its surroundings. This project is extremely dense. I don't have to say that. The selectmen have said it in the letter today, endorsing a denial of the project. You know, the planning board has said it. It's not necessarily, we're not here tonight to say the project should be denied or that the project can't go forward in any form. I think what we're saying is that the project in its current form is really deficient in a lot of different respects. And one of the respects is the open space, the lack of anywhere for anyone in the project. 120 units of families, there's nowhere for them to go to just have some outdoor space. The rail trail connection would be a huge way to solve that. But I haven't heard, and maybe I'll hear it tonight, I haven't heard any commitment from the applicant to actually pay for that. That, to me, would be a very reasonable offset to the deficiency of the open space and recreational areas on the site. This project, I understand, is 100% affordable. I understand it's a tax credit project. The profit margins are not like other typical 40B projects. But it is still a profitable project. The pro forma that was submitted to the state that I believe you folks have a copy of showed that the project will have a net operating income of around $1.4 million for 20 years. The developer will be paying itself a developer fee of $2 million. So there is profit here. And I think it's reasonable for the developer to contribute to the cost of burrowing that tunnel, because that is necessary so that this project has access to open space or access to recreational opportunities. I want to address fire protection briefly. I know the fire chief is here, and perhaps he can correct me if I'm misstating any part of the CMRs on fire protection, but I believe that the issue with the secondary access it's actually not secondary access. The issue is that the fire department cannot access the whole perimeter of the building from the interior driveway and parking lot. So the only way for the fire department to access the back of the buildings, so the part of the building that faces Pittman Road and faces the railroad tracks, is to get to it from Pittman Road. The problem is that, and by the way, that's required under the state fire prevention code. The fire prevention code requires that the fire access roads not be more than 250 feet from any point in the building. So that it wouldn't comply if the project relied solely on the, excuse me, relied solely on the interior driveway. So it needs Pittman Road, and Pittman Road is for all intents and purposes a dead-end road because you can't, there's no legal right to go through Doherty Circle. And dead-end roads can't exceed 150 feet without a turnaround. Oh, is that for me? Oh, thank you.
Full service.
We're a hospital here in Swampscott.
So Pittman Road is a dead-end road, and the fire chief had asked for either access through Doherty Circle with an emergency gate or a sufficient turnaround at the end of Pittman Road. Now, I couldn't tell from the plans that are on the OneDrive and any of the documents whether this issue's really been resolved. It doesn't sound like it has been. And the way I see it sitting here today, I think we have a violation of the State Fire Prevention Code or nonconformity that needs to get addressed. I don't see how this project can go forward, and it's probably more within the jurisdiction of the fire chief than it's the zoning board. But it's a design issue that, frankly, I think needs to get addressed. So I think that covers the substantive issues. I think there's a lot of work here that needs to get done by the applicant. I think there needs to be a lot more supporting documentation on the connection with the sewer system. The drainage system needs to get revised. We haven't seen those plans yet. So I think there's at least another month worth of work. I would encourage the applicant to grant the extension that's needed from the 180-day clock. And I would also encourage the zoning board to keep the hearing open to review the draft decisions. So I know Mr. Freeman has provided a draft decision. The best process is once you close the hearing, you can't have those conversations. So the best process is actually to keep the hearing open to enable the discussion on the draft conditions and the decision on waivers. So just want to plant that.
I would invite just as I invited the petitioner to present us with proposed findings of fact, I would invite you, if you had comments on those findings of fact,
sure,
or wanted to submit an alternative, you're more than welcome to do so. I think that would help our board, whether the decision is in favor or against, to get to the best set of facts that we can find and to understand, different perspectives. So you're absolutely welcome to submit that if you'd like.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for your diligence.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm wondering about that with, for the fire chief. And that question about the CMR, I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at that. I don't like putting everybody on the spot right away. It's like asking one of these, could be an obscure question. I don't know.
Good evening.
Or if it's something. Hi, Chief.
Hi, how are you? Good evening. Yeah, so the initial preference for the fire department would have been a pass-through through Doherty Circle. We think it would have been beneficial to both properties, Doherty Circle and the proposed project. However, the redesign provided what's called a hammerhead turnaround at the end of Pittman Road, which satisfies our requirement. In addition, the applicants have provided additional, over and above the requirement, access and suppression features within the design of the building, eventual design of the building, with fire department standpipes, roof access through more stairways than there would otherwise be required to do. So, there are a lot of projects that abut tracks or are in other urban areas that you don't have full access all the way around the building. So, we are satisfied from a fire department, from a life safety standpoint, that we have adequate access and suppression features and that have been, they've asserted that they would incorporate into the design of the building.
So I'm just wondering also if you could take a look at that CMR that's referenced in Attorney Hill's letter, and if you had any comments, you could submit them after the hearing tonight, just to take a look and make sure we're not missing something on that CMR that is suggested. I'm sure Marissa can share the letter with you.
Yeah, these
the
two.
references it.
And,
Okay. So, I do want to go back to the petitioner and give the petitioner an opportunity, if they want, to address any of the comments. Told you can reserve until the next hearing, or your choice, but please, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and 99.9% of what we will say will be reserved because we don't want to be willy-nilly, and so as the letter has come in from Mr. Hill today, and the discussion tonight is helpful on the other item, so I'm not suggesting to my team that we want to respond in any detail. If anybody has a quick comment, that's fine. I did want to say just briefly as to the Section E in Mr. Hill's letter, which he mentioned first. What I would say is he actually hit the nail on the head. We're talking about the conditions that are very specific, tied to a standard. So the case law that does exist that talks about conditions subsequent, quote unquote, being not preferred or even unacceptable to HAC is when they're very broad and calls for basically almost review everything down the road. But now you've had substantial peer review. If we have custom-made tied to a standard, as the chairman suggested earlier, that certainly would pass muster. The other difference is that, you know, these would be conditions that presumably we agree to, although again, we can't really agree to anything in advance, but that's very different posture and context than what those cases at HAC have said. So just briefly on that. And the other thing, just as to extension, I did say, yes, we will extend for another hearing date. Need to agree on a date, obviously, but that's just logistical. I don't think we're at the point of needing to extend the 180 days, as far as I recall. So if we're at the point...
I'm not sure I understand your...
Well, there's two things. You asked if we agree to continue because we had hoped to close. And
Although I'm asking for a continuance to 180 days to take some of that pressure off us because we have these open issues.
What...
So that's what I really need to know.
Question, do you have your calculation of what that date is?
I don't. I'd have to see if Ezra perhaps has the calculation. I've had it in my mind that I've got to have a written decision by, I believe it's the end of May.
It's 180 days from the date the hearing opened, I believe.
Right.
Which was...
Let me make it easier. And again, naturally, we do agree, because we want to respond to the things that have been said, that we want another hearing. You know, I think the date is sometime in May, but we don't need the exact date. You know, we will extend the 180-day period by 2 weeks, and I'll send in a letter to that effect.
Well, could we agree to a date so we all know what the date is? And could we agree to extend to say the middle of June, so that I know that we can...
That's about, that would be about right. You're remembering, or else you're a good guesser, our calculation is about May 28th. So, you know, 2 weeks is basically mid-June. You can look at a calendar and agree on a date. I agree, that's a good idea.
The only thing, I do have vacation June 2nd and June 10th, and I'm likely to be charged with being involved with this decision. So I would prefer maybe the third week of June, so it gives me a little bit of time when I get back from vacation. I'm going to look to schedule our next, hopefully we take care of it before that. Because I'm hoping that we can pick our next date, and that's going to be our final date.
Since you normally do things on Tuesdays, is June 15th okay?
June 14th?
14th. Mark, I have the calculation date, the 180 days expiring on May 29th. That's a Sunday of Memorial Day weekend.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, the deadline is to close the hearing, not to issue the decision. So you actually have another...
Oh, then I have 40 days?
You have 40 days
decision?
after the date. Yep.
Okay, all right.
Correct.
Excellent, thank you.
So June 14th would be the date by which we would want to close the hearing? That would be the 180-day extension to June 14th, and then we have 40 days to issue the decision. Is that right?
Right. Which we
the
hope...
only issue there would be if you wanted to keep the hearing open as you refine the decision as per Attorney Hill's suggestion, which I think is in many ways a good one.
Yeah,
but it's true, you could close the hearing and then still issue the decision after.
To that point, actually, I disagree with Mr. Hill that you can't engage in discussion of the draft decision. I certainly agree that some town council agree with Mr. Hill, but many ZBAs and towns, we have gone back and forth during the deliberative sessions after the hearing is closed. The key thing is not to introduce new exhibits or new testimony. So, you know, you don't have to decide that now, but And hopefully, even before June 14th, there would be certainly the one hearing that we're talking about now, and if you feel as though we need another one, perhaps. But we can address the question of keeping the hearing open or not once you're satisfied that you have all the information, and we, agree with that. And then, the question of deliberating.
So why don't we, for now, agree to extend the 180-day period to June 14th, which is a Tuesday, okay? And pick a date in May for our next meeting. Have you talked about a further date that works for you guys?
Hold on a second.
I just want to put it out there that we do have town meeting the third week of May, and it is likely to be a big event. I would reserve all 4 weeknights, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for town meeting.
So what about, is May 10th too soon, or is that okay?
I can't do May 10th.
Can't do May 10th? Are you away that week?
Just that day.
Well, we could do the Wednesday, we could look, actually, I can't do May 11th. We could, how about Monday, May 9th?
Yep.
When is your meeting, your regular meeting?
17th. So that's why, and then we have the week after, we have
May 9th.
town meeting here.
Works for me.
May 9th, that work for you guys?
Yeah, sorry about
Right,
that.
that's okay, we gotta make sure, you need 5 really, where you get the simple majority, and
Is it good for Dan?
you okay on that date, Dan? May 9th, on Monday? May 9th?
That works.
It's fine with me. I may be coming back from my granddaughter's birthday party in Vermont, but that may be...
I'm sorry, Peter.
I may be coming back from my granddaughter's birthday party in Vermont, but it may be easier to get here
That-
than going through Boston at rush hour.
It's on the way to the Cape, right?
Yeah, instead of a Cape, yeah. That's fine.
All right, so let's continue, plan on continuing to May 9th. Now, there was, so we've given the petitioner an opportunity to address new items, procedural issues. We've taken care of our next meeting. We're going to keep it open. We've heard from a Butters Council who has presented us with a written list of different issues.
I have a couple questions.
Oh,
Is that
absolutely.
okay?
Yeah,
So Cliff is not here, correct?
yep.
Last month, he had sort of a laundry list of items he was still waiting on, like floor plans and just kind of some basic things. And any discussion that's happened since then, I don't have any record of. So
I don't either.
if all that was provided to him, he had something about a garage door. He was concerned about windows and where they were in the units. It sounds like our chief said that the stairway access to the roof was good, but he had questions about that. He hadn't seen those plans. So if any of those conversations have happened this month, we don't have record of it. Or I don't,
Well, let's ask the petitioner if they've addressed or plan to address.
No, I do apologize. Those have all been submitted. I did ask Cliff to get stuff to you guys, like in writing, saying that he was signed off, but I apologize. You all should have, we sent him a big package
Well,
addressing everything.
So, yeah, I'd like to see the plans as well, and,
Okay, sorry.
yeah, I mean, and see what.
Okay, so yeah, you should look for something from Cliff to satisfy,
Yeah.
that's showing us that it's satisfied. Anything else, Heather? Any
No,
other questions?
that was the main one.
Okay, so,
So, that sounds like, if I may, it sounds like...
go ahead, Ezra.
I would say head into that meeting, and maybe we want to say even, set a deadline a week or maybe 10 days before. We want, the final letter, and I would say that what means final is it's from your peer reviewer. That we don't want anything more from the applicant that the peer reviewer hasn't reviewed on, the stormwater, water, sewer, on the architecture, on the parking, and just have the kind of final clean bill of health saying every issue addressed, or here's the condition for it. I think that's what we need to see, and then, then anything else added to that is issues the board's raised that don't fall into those technical categories.
Right.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, we've been talking about, oh, we got a letter the last day, but we also got all the stormwater the last, yesterday as well. So if that happens again next month, we're not going to be ready to vote.
Well, hopefully it's addressed expeditiously and to the satisfaction of our peer review engineer. But that's why, I've looked, we've got time. I don't want to do it, but to continue again after that, after another public hearing, but I've been pushing to get it finalized, and I think we probably wouldn't have got as much information if I didn't say this was going to be the night we voted.
I agree.
So, I think that.
But I think we've just, I mean, it's a pattern. Like, we're getting all our information in the day before the meetings, throughout this whole process. And so we're always sitting here kind of, and I've said this before, we're always sitting here kind of on the fly, like, where no one wants to comment because they haven't had time to review, and we just need to get the information earlier.
Right. One other comment I would have for the petitioner is the issue that's coming up about the open space that was brought up by Mr. Hill. If you choose to address it in writing, the suggestion that there are no other projects that have such a lack of open space, and whether it's an urban or non-urban community, if there's evidence of that you want to put forth, or, just letting you know that it seems to be a live issue that you've got an opportunity to address by arguing, or, so if you want to put other evidence in front of us, something that you have the opportunity to do. So Ezra, we're waiting for there are some substantial changes, it sounds like, that are presented by the changes in the infiltration system for the stormwater, in the parking lot, maybe having a little change in the elevation, and the utility analysis. We're at 9 o'clock. I said we would go to no later than 10. I don't know where we're going to wait for all these changes, if it's appropriate to take any additional public comment at this time or not.
I mean, I think I guess I would recommend, if there are issues that have not been raised, at some point, this is a very tricky issue where you never want to say it's too late to raise issues.
Yeah.
But the later issues, when new issues come up late, it does create this problem of then we think we're about to resolve everything and then a new issue comes up. So and this is why the whole statute contemplates at some point hearings need to be closed. I agree with the attorney that it's nice to keep the hearing open so you can engage in this discussion, but at some point there can be this problem where it can become maddening for the board because you never know when you can be done, and look at what you have on the table. So that said, I do think if there are new issues out there, they're worth raising. Okay. With many of them, for example, Attorney Hill mentioned this thing about the SSOs. I don't think we've talked about that before. I think I tend to assume we hired peer review engineers. They think about such things, but it may be they haven't, and so I suppose it doesn't hurt for people to say, in the same way the board would, if the public have concerns. I wouldn't think you need to engage in providing an answer for everything right now, but just to make sure it's flagged, your peer reviewers will hear it, and if there's anything in there that hasn't been looked at, they'll be sure in that final review memo that it includes a resolution of that. How you want to run your public input is certainly up to you, but I think I would keep it focused on those issues and make it really clear we've already taken input and discussed all of those issues, so it's something new.
Okay. All right, so I think I'll do that in 1 second. The other thing that I didn't address, there was another letter that came in late in the day, or late in the process today, from the town administrator with an attachment of the earlier letter that went to the Housing Appeals Committee, and we really haven't talked about that. And I don't know that letter addressed anything that specifically that we have jurisdiction over, but my only suggestion is that if there was an opportunity to have dialogue with the town administrator or with anyone else that you thought might be appropriate, that's your choice. So I just wanted to at least say that, so that I don't regret not saying, hey, why didn't you have a dialogue here? So that, I think that's all I really need to say about that. So with that, I would invite, if there's
So
any.
can I say one more thing about that?
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
this kind of came up as something that Attorney Hill said as well, is to address the density issue, because that's the issue that comes up in that letter, and also in the attachment from the select board.
Yep.
It was sort of, they kind of did some ratings of density of other projects, so.
Right, I'm sure Peter's going to tell us what he thinks about density issues.
Well, if you've researched case law, as you said numerous times, which is absolutely appropriate, and as long as it kept you awake. But as to density, there's really no issue with 40B as to density. The question is intensity, meaning what are the impacts? You could theoretically have a 500-unit building that's 10 stories high or 20 stories high if all of the safety factors were met. And I'm not proposing that that's what would be here. But the point is, the number of units per acre, really, the HAC says in the appeals courts, is basically meaningless. The question is, do you satisfy traffic? Do you satisfy stormwater? You know, and all of the things that have been discussed tonight. So again, it's maybe subtle, but that's basically how Housing Appeals Committee has dealt with density. Density itself isn't the issue. It's the question of intensity of use, and can all of the impacts be handled in a way that's safe and appropriate, which is the subject of our inquiry tonight, which is appropriate. Thanks.
But what about the relationship between density and open space? I know we do have jurisdiction over open space.
Well, there's several factors which I will cite cases, so I won't go into that tonight.
You can, that's, you know, I said earlier about perhaps something you might want to address, the open space
Right.
issue that's raised.
Right. Oh, we'll address it, for sure.
Okay. All right, so, great. So I'm going to ask members of the public if you have new issues that you think the petitioner should consider, this board should consider, so that we're in a great position at our next meeting to close the public hearing and have a vote on this petition, knowing that there's going to be changes in some of the utilities in this plan, and that those are being addressed by our peer review, by the petitioner's engineer, and we've talked about those extensively. I would invite the comments, but I'm just trying to stay away from a repeat of prior comments that we've heard, and I'm going to give an opportunity before we close the public hearing at the next meeting, to give you that opportunity to say, in general, what you feel about the petition after seeing all of the evidence. So this is really to raise questions that you think we may have missed, that the petitioner or the abutters attorney, our peer review, the town may have not adequately addressed, and you think we should address before we reconvene. So I'd ask you to use the raise your hand feature and to identify yourself if there are any issues. So the first person is live because he raised his hand earlier and now he's raised it again. So,
Sorry, Mike, sorry, if you wouldn't mind just moving over to the microphone so that everyone on Zoom can hear you as well.
Hi.
Hi.
Mike Wood, I live on Upland Road. So just one question before I get started. So we're going to have a chance to speak at the end of the next meeting also?
Yes.
All right, so there's just one new thing that I'd like to bring up. And I went down and measured Pittman Road with the tape measure from curb to curb. It's 19 feet and 6 inches.
Yeah.
So I disagree with the chief, with all due respect, chief, about the access, because if there's cars parked on both sides of that road, and you figure a car's like 6 feet, all right? And I Googled the width of a fire engine. It's about 8 feet, 8.4 feet. So the fire engine won't fit down that street if there's cars parked on both sides.
Right,
That's
so,
my-
so one thing about that, if you look at the, on the public access to, all the materials that have been filed, there's, some comments directly on is gonna happen with Pittman Road. So if you look at what our peer review study, our expert has said, he's talked about the, Pittman Road not having parking on one side, because what the petitioner is doing is they're gonna have on their property parallel parking to the
Right,
street.
saw that.
So there therefore can't be parking on the street, on the public way, so it won't be blocked on that side. What the town does to regulate the other side of Pittman is up to the select board, which regulates, and the DPW, which regulates parking. And, you know, but your numbers are pretty close to what are in those reports in terms of the width, but there is a little bit of a difference. And I'd suggest before the next meeting, you know, taking a good look at the reports from Emery and from Jeff, and also looking at the plans that were completed by Hancock, because it shows a lot about the width of the way, that there won't be parking on one side, questions about what'll happen on the other side.
So has that been
But that's-
decided?
It
The one-
hasn't been decided.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's an issue we have
No.
jurisdiction over. We're hearing from the chief, but I think that's an appropriate thing for you to address with the chief, and to see if he continues to maintain that he thinks there's adequate access there. I think that would be the right direction to go in, to express your concerns. He's hearing your concerns tonight.
Yeah, because unless, you know, someone makes that decision where there won't be any parking allowed on the residence side, which kind of penalizes the residents, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that,
The residents on
That goes
Pittman Road
decided.
are dramatically impacted by
right,
the whole project.
I'll talk.
Absolutely, and
It's me.
that's just one factor, so.
Yeah. All right, thanks, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it. Is there anyone else that wanted to be heard? Yes?
Hello, my name is Sandy Spring. I live at 6 Hillcrest Circle. I think there's a hole around the parking issue. From 30 years on Hillcrest Circle, I've experienced overflow from the train station parking. So they're already up there. Also, I've noticed around me that almost for all the houses, not all of them, but almost all, for every resident that is of driving age, they have a car. The two-family across the street, there are five cars. Other houses, I've seen 4 drivers, 4 cars. I don't have any reason to believe that that would be any different for this project. And the parking spaces have not been allotted for that. And that puts the burden back on us, the residents. I don't think that's right.
Right, that's an issue that I think our board is considering very closely with the parking ratio that's been proposed with 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom units, and the limited parking that's proposed. So it's definitely something that there's been a lot of attention paid to by both the petitioner, trying to increase their parking, coming up with some additional spots, and with our peer review from Rod from World Tech, and definitely an issue that we're considering.
Thank you. I hope that the solution does not mean that we residents get the short end of the stick on this.
I appreciate, I see how difficult it is in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I see how limited the parking is. And I also see what the town has benefit of getting our own expert to review. And one of the issues that we have is that our expert's saying, reporting back that I believe it's a 1.06 ratio is satisfactory in his opinion. So I'm not a traffic expert. We have a peer review engineer who has spent a lot of time out in that neighborhood. And, you know, we have the evidence. Your testimony, though, is evidence that we are able to consider as well, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wanted to bring up any new items?
I do have a hand raised on Zoom,
Okay.
so I will be letting Maura White speak.
Hello again, Ms. White. I think you're on mute. Still on mute. There you go.
Now?
Yes.
Okay, so my issues continue to be, I live at 26 Elm Place, so all the traffic for this building, the entrance is on Elm Place. And we already have Burke's here, so there's inadequate parking and traffic coming, where's it going? What, in and out of the building is on Elm Place. And the sidewalk is gonna be proposed on Burke's building, but is anybody can take it into consideration that the building that Burke's is in has got a metal roof, and it builds up the snow, and it comes tumbling down, tumbling down. I've been watching it for years, so you wouldn't be able to put a sidewalk there. Again, I'm going back to the traffic and the parking. As a butter, it's gonna affect me directly.
So your concerns have not been addressed, in your opinion, adequately?
No, no. So, okay, my house, we have 4 cars. Sometimes we pull into the front of the house because that's where the stairway is. My house is literally on the street. So what happens to us, just like over at Pittman, what happens to us on Elm Place that park in front of our house? I think the traffic flow hasn't been addressed appropriately. Where is all this traffic? Everybody going into that building is coming down Elm Place. Everybody leaving that building is coming down Elm Place. Everybody going to Burke's is going down Elm Place. We're already inundated with Burke's. Classes go on weekends, days, nights. People don't adhere to the signs on the building, no parking. No, they're rushing to get their kids, pick up their kids. My driveway's been blocked multiple times. So for me, it's the parking issue, the traffic, hasn't been addressed for me down in Elm Place.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your comments, Ms. White. I don't know, we've heard the same comments from you prior meeting, and I don't know that there's been any change to the petitioner's petition, so it sounds like whatever they plan on doing, other than some changes on potentially on the sidewalk, and that there might be some new changes that were suggested by our traffic engineer with sidewalk instead, actual sidewalk and crosswalk being built and with potential one-way. But they haven't made those changes. They hadn't seen the letter from our peer review engineer. So there might be some changes. I would encourage the petitioner, again, to reach out with you and see what else they can do to address your concerns.
I feel alone in this whole thing. This teeny little house here with no say. There's going to be traffic going up and down. The sidewalk situation, there's no place to put a sidewalk down in Mountain Place. I should go measure it like the person who spoke before and see. I don't know. It hasn't been addressed. My issues have not been addressed at all.
Okay, well, I can only invite the petitioner to consider your comments. I know that our board will consider your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yes.
Hi, Jan DiPaolo, 30 Hillcrest Circle, and I'm just wondering if you've heard from the school committee or anyone with regards to the impact of this monstrosity and what it's going to do to our schools?
We have not heard from the school committee. I don't know that the number of students, whether our schools can support it, is something we actually have jurisdiction over under the statute which regulates.
I was just curious if they had.
I'm not aware of there being any.
Voiced any opinion.
I'm not aware of there being any opinion, and I'm not also an expert as to whether it's proper for them to comment. I can just tell you I'm not aware of any comments.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mercer, anybody? Oh, we have somebody else here, present.
Thanks so much. I'm Chris Mancini. I live at Walker Road here in Swampscott. I heard one new thing today that I hadn't heard before. I just wanted to comment briefly. So it was brought up the question of whether open space or affordable housing is more important, and I just want to caution the board against having a question of, well, both things are important. And just as a bit of background, my professional and personal life, I'm a huge open space advocate. All of my full career has been in creating and opportunities and access for open space for people. And that said, you need to look at what's appropriate for the location. And this is a spot, a transit-oriented development close to public transportation. And I've seen the proponent being responsive to questions of the around the rail trail and things. Again, something I'm very passionate about personally. It's one of the big reasons I chose to live in Swampscott. It was the prospect of that rail trail. But it's we know the percentages. We know the need for affordable housing here in Swampscott, and you all know that. So again, it's just something new I heard today. I wanted to comment on that. And choose what's appropriate for this location without being distracted by false analogies.
So
saying this incorrectly.
Equivalency, I think.
Equivalency, thank you.
Is what you're saying, just so I understand, is you're a big proponent of open space, you do it for a living, you focus on that, but what your comment or observation is that based on what you've heard tonight, that
I comment what I've heard throughout the process, but again, I heard Mr. Hill, I believe it was, spoke about open space being perhaps more important than I maybe.
He said it was deficient.
Okay, I may have misheard it.
There was no open space that was really proposed by the petition.
I heard that, and I believe I also heard him refer to open space being perhaps more important than, and I may have misheard that, and I apologize if I.
But what I'm just to cut to your observation, I just want to make sure I understand it.
Yeah.
Is that the need for affordable housing in this particular project, taking into account the rail trail connectivity, is okay in your book? Is that what?
That's what I am saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
you. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else on any new issues?
I don't have anyone on Zoom.
Okay, so with that, I am going to take a roll call vote to continue the public hearing to Monday, May 9th. And
Can we set an official deadline for new information? Is that a real issue?
you have a deadline for what?
For new information?
Yeah, we can, at least.
I don't know how long our peer review needs on the new, and I mean, and I don't know how long it takes. It sounds like a very big planning project for the raising of the drainage system, but I don't know how much time you need, and then our peer review is gonna need probably a week to go over that. So I guess that's the question.
So if we said, if we were thinking we wanted to have everything at least a week, because sometimes it's back and forth, why don't we just say our expectation is that everything be complete, but the comments by anything that we're waiting for, including the review by the peer review, that they use their best efforts to have everything filed by 1 week prior to the hearing.
I mean, that sounds good, but that's not what Heather's talking about.
Well, I think it's difficult.
Use the best efforts.
I think it's difficult.
That's
Well,
not gonna-
I expect,
best efforts isn't
but
what
I,
she's talking
but I expect that the petitioner wants to get they're pushing to get a vote tonight if they could.
Yeah.
So I expect they're gonna use their best efforts to get everything completed. And I would expect that if they get everything done as timely as they possibly can, and that they're keeping on our peer review people to reply quickly, that we can be hopeful.
But it's a great idea because, I mean, I think I share Heather's frustration, which is, and it's human nature, but it's that deadline, the hearing date, and all of a sudden we get the flood of information, right? Based on the hearing date, not based on a submission deadline date.
Yeah.
Which is in advance of the hearing, to give the peer reviewers time, to give us time, so that this is as productive an exercise as possible.
I have trouble setting it because I know how bad I am in my professional life at doing that.
But I mean, it's
My
so
personal life.
consistently coming to us the day before that it
How can I
feels
say that?
deliberate. Like, it doesn't feel like it's just waiting to the last minute. It feels as though there's and I don't want to say this, but it feels as though we're getting this information with no time to look at it, like, consistently.
Right,
So-
but it is a short window between meetings, and it's, I mean, I think that's, if we don't have, I mean, what I would say is, if we don't have it timely, we're gonna be looking to extend
Yeah.
the meeting, or we're gonna have a vote, and the vote may
The vote
not
will be
be.
based on not having information.
The vote would be just based on what we have in front of us, and it may not be complete. So.
And by the way, that goes for the town as well,
Yeah,
for
it's
select
okay.
board, for town administrator, for the
Right.
public, based on, if you have comments, if you have questions, don't wait until the very last minute to submit them.
Yeah. Ezra, did you have a comment about setting a deadline?
No, I mean, I think this is exactly the right conversation. The two comments, one would be to maybe, if you want everything by May 2nd, we ask the peer reviewers, and I think the really key one here is Eileen and Victoria, to back out when would they need to see stuff. And then the second piece was just move towards what I was saying about, maybe we need to say that the peer reviewers really just need to give us if they can get some back and forth, we get a good condition with input from the applicant. If we don't get good back and forth, we just legislate a condition. In order for this, you need to do 12-inch sewer the whole way, or you need to, you just come up with whatever standard it is that you require. It's better when you can do it working with them and they show you how they meet it, and you agree. But if the board is gonna be pushed into having to make a decision quickly, I just want to be sure you have a condition that you can slap on it, that, you know, meets the standards and addresses these concerns. So.
Just so you know too, we don't have the revised stormwater design yet.
Oh, yeah, because it hasn't been created.
Right, so we're trying to make sure that all gets done
It's gonna take a while.
as quick as we can. I mean, I can say with, when the comments were raised by our peer review, I see that, you know, Hancock got a field crew out there right away, and I know engineers I work with, I wouldn't have got a field crew out there that quick. They did a great job at doing that. So it just doesn't happen, you know, necessarily overnight. So I would just ask everyone to use their best efforts. Yes, Deborah?
Hancock can get their reviewed plans, documentation, calculations within 7 days from today.
Wow.
Okay, that'd be great.
And we would ask that VM would review within a week.
Right, so the
Week after
turnaround be 7 days.
Yeah.
That's the expectation. So please try to, everyone to stick with that Hancock's gonna look to get their work all done 7 days from today, everything complete over to VM, and then VM looking to try and turn around that back to Hancock and to the board, distributing those comments as we go, 7 days, so that if there's any further response necessary, that it can be done timely, and hopefully these issues are narrowing and taking less time because they're moving forward.
Mark, can we also, everybody has access to the OneDrive, right?
Yep.
Could everybody commit to review the OneDrive and make sure that all of your documents that you have submitted are on there?
Complete.
And I think the town will do the same, because the last thing we want to do is get back to a hearing and someone say, oh, I hadn't seen this.
Right, we missed the March 22nd.
That's a
road
helpful
tech.
suggestion. We can all do that because there is a lot going on, so something was missed, but we understand, you know, that March 21st
Yep.
Rod's comment. So yes, that's a good idea.
Okay,
And the other thing, just a reminder, the title work for, if there is an easement needed, that might be a time-consuming, I don't know.
so right, and, you know, I suggested at the last meeting that the petitioner, I saw in the draft decision, I see that Peter addressed an easement, giving an easement for pedestrian and bicycle access over the land, and it'll be shown, it's shown on the plan where it's located. So I don't know that we need to have,
I'm sorry, I'm talking about if they needed any title work done for the.
oh, Doherty Circle?
Yeah, for Doherty Circle.
I think that's an important issue.
Yeah.
And I think it's not only an important issue for the petitioner to address, but for the abutters that are
And then
concerned about that.
Is there any sort of title issue with the location of the Burke's parking and the satellite parking? The Burke's parking that's in the middle of your parking, and then the satellite parking that's technically not going to be the same lot. Is there a long?
Well, you know, that's one thing that, you know, what's proposed in the petition, it sounds like, is that there's a license to use the parking for Burke's where in the designated area. What happens if that, you know, license are revocable? I want to just make, I would want to make sure that there's some permanency while that use is there, or that there's a restriction we control.
And also the use of that satellite lot as well, how that's written up so that, so that's.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I don't believe we said license and easement. I do believe that we've said easement. Beyond that, it's not a title issue. That's how the right to use the proposed parking that's part of the project would be cemented for the project. Beyond that, you know, we show ownership and the purchase and sale agreement, and there's not an issue of title. It's just a question of showing that there's an easement for that use,
Right.
which we wouldn't have the easement yet, but we don't object to a condition because that's what we're proposing. In fact,
So, I'm sorry, so, because we're talking about two different things. The title was about the,
Doherty, going across Doherty, which maybe I just missed it, but I hadn't heard about that. I think we thought that because, if I'm recalling Angela correctly.
It was in the letter that came in late today. when it was
Okay,
brought up.
right. I think we probably assumed that because I believe Gino said it was public sewer, right? The
Yes.
pipe itself?
Yes.
Right, so, but now that the question has been asked, we'll look into it, so.
and so that's separate, obviously. Then we're talking about the the kind of lease agreement for that satellite lot, because that won't be owned by the property.
Correct.
So that will be something that,
Correct, yeah, we'll address it, and you're right, it's either ground lease or easement, but yes, we'll make sure that it's, part and parcel of what we need for the project.
yeah, and I'd rather, I mean, I don't know about you, but rather than seeing it as a condition, it's would be something that would be nice to.
Well, we've had some, Dan, I'm sure remember, not too far from this project. Do you remember we had that project on Burrell, and we required, the easement, it had to be an easement for off-site parking. You remember the one, it was like where the liquor store is, where they did work on the building, and it was,
All right.
the parking was on a abutting lot, and we wanted to make sure that it was gonna exist long after the project was built. So I would expect that we would be requiring a condition that it's an easement for all of the parking, and that Burke's parking, that it's coterminous with the lease agreement that Burke's has.
We agree?
Okay?
Sure.
So, Heather, any other questions or comments?
No, I guess some of that stuff, is that stuff that we will see documentation of, or we'll just condition that it?
Well,
will
there,
be
we
posted
have
later?
the
How does that
draft
work?
decision that addressed some of that. If there need to be, based on these comments and questions, which are excellent, if the petitioner thinks there should be a supplement to the proposed decision that address some of these as proposed conditions, or if it's, needs to be changed, they can submit that to us, because it's very helpful to see it.
Like a draft
In a
easement or
draft.
something, but they're not.
I don't know that we necessarily need to have the draft easement, but just show, it's gonna show it on the plan.
Right.
And making it a condition that there needs to be an easement that provides for, so much parking in that area, and it's gonna run with the land.
Right. That's what I would suggest. Exactly.
Okay, so with that, I'm gonna make a motion to continue the public hearing, conditioned upon the petitioner signing the extension for the 180-day period to June 14th. And the next public hearing will be May 9th, and it will be in-person, hybrid, and beginning at 7 PM. So do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
So I'm gonna do a roll call vote. So I am a yes. Dan?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Paula?
Yes.
Okay, so we're continued until May 9th. So thank you, everyone.
My computer ran out of juice.
I mean, but.
Mark, could I just get a motion to adjourn to officially end the webinar?
And we're gonna have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.